Good afternoon and welcome back to College Football on Tap, brought to you by the On Tap Sports Nut. I'm your host, Chris White, joined alongside by Bruno. Bruno, how's your weekend, buddy?
Oh, it was all good. Had a really exciting Saturday of college football that was enjoyable. The NFL games were actually really boring yesterday, I felt, for the most part. I did not really enjoy them too much, but
I thought the noon slate was pretty decent. Those 3 o'clock games were fucking awful, though.
yeah, I think that's what it was that kind of left that dragging feeling. And then you kind of watched that Bills-Giants game, whatever the fuck that was. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just – it didn't feel like a very exciting weekend, even though there was like 2 or 3 games that came down to the wire for the noon slate. But yeah, overall, Saturday won the weekend for me for sure. It's obviously there was a couple of big games, but none of them as big as the Oregon and Washington game. And boy, did that game live up to the hype. Just so many mixed emotions on it because I feel like Oregon might have been the better team in a lot of facets, but the one thing that they definitely weren't better at was the end of the football game. I thought the coaches kind of hurt Oregon quite a little bit in that matchup.
Yeah, I caught a lot of that game, not all of it, but especially that fourth quarter. There were definitely some questionable decisions. I didn't really like what Oregon was doing on offense. I mean, they had that back and forth towards the end there. And I mean, to go out the way they did on a field goal, that's got to hurt. I mean, probably the 2 best teams, or not, I'm not even going to say probably, it's the 2 best teams in the Pac-12 after this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And they both have an arguable case for number 1, but obviously Washington comes out on top of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it all could come down to what happens in terms of a Pac-12 championship game later on in the season. But, the way that I looked at it in terms of the way that Oregon didn't score at the end of the first half, I felt like that was going to come back to haunt them. And honestly, if
they ran out of time, right?
Yeah, they ran out of time. They could have kicked a field goal and not have risked the possibility of running out of time or
oh, you know what? Yeah, I remember our group chat going off talking about how those 3 probably going to matter when we get down the line later on.
Yeah, and then you look at it in the final score of the game, Washington won by 3. So I just felt like Oregon, made some questionable decisions there throughout the game. I believe that the head coach even came out and said that this one's on me. I kind of cost the team this game, which, that's kind of big to say. The players on the field obviously do matter, but at the same point, like there was quite a few things that were going on throughout the course of the game. And it was just like, oh, you're giving Washington opportunities that you don't want to give them. And the way that Michael Penix Jr. played in that game, you obviously didn't want him to have the ball throughout most of it because he wasn't having a hard time getting the ball down the field and scoring.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, I forget if it was off of a turnover or something or a missed field goal. I can't remember. But they panned over to Penix on the sideline with 2 or 3 minutes left in the fourth. And he had no emotion while the rest of the team was like jumping up and down. He just threw his helmet on like fucking go mode.
Yeah, definitely had to. It takes that kind of player a lot to win games late, and there's a lot of guys that, you kind of say like, oh, dang, you're screwed if you do this. I know that with the guys I was watching yesterday, they kept on saying that with Jalen Hurts getting the ball late, like, oh, he's just going to hurt him late. He's just going to get him late. And that didn't happen for him yesterday, but it's
nice. Kind of, 3 or 4 picks.
Yeah, but you kind of see him there and you look, and it's like, oh, he's pissed off now. He's pissed off now, and it really does depend on the day and like the player and the mentality that they have, and if they can pull it off. And Michael Penix just really very impressive. Obviously with what happened in the Notre Dame USC game, like this game could mean a Heisman for Michael Penix, just for getting.
This weekend definitely opened up some eyes on the Heisman watch, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, Caleb Williams didn't play bad. Like it was awful. It was probably the worst we've seen in his 3 years in college.
Yeah, I mean, it was his worst game stats wise. He's never thrown 3 interceptions before like he did. But before we get carried away on that, we can also just say Bo Nix did look really good for Oregon in this game as well.
I was having this conversation with somebody over the weekend, and I like Bo Nix. I hated him in Oregon. I think it was probably the whole legacy, or at Auburn. I'm sorry, probably the whole legacy thing. But he's a good quarterback. He'll probably get drafted pretty high. Maybe he pans out. Maybe he doesn't. He drops dimes. He has a good arm. He knows when and how to use his feet. I just don't see him as that field general kind of guy, like that Andrew Luck, that Peyton Manning kind of guy.
Yeah. But I honestly, like, being in the Pac-12, I don't really sit there and pay attention to the late games too much. Like, I said it a lot on Friday when Ross was on the show with me, or on Saturday, and I just kind of kept saying, like, like the Pac-12, I never really paid attention to until this year. It's just never
there wasn't really a big reason to.
Yeah, it's those 9 o'clock starts and whatnot. By that time, I was either at the bars a lot of the time, or now it's kind of like I may be at the bar or I may be sleeping. Who knows? But it's, for me, like, this was the third opportunity I think I've had to watch Oregon. So the third time I really watched Bo Nix play, and everything I see, I'm impressed by. I mean, he doesn't make mistakes. He does everything correctly in terms of when to use his feet. I mean, I know he didn't run the ball too well this game. I think he had 7 carries, but and didn't even reach like 15 yards. But he still will do it if he has to. I mean, you got to have that ability to get out of the pocket and not get sacked. And, he seems to do all those things correctly. I mean, Washington in the first half of this game was they were bulldozing that offensive line, and they were coming at him, and he was making big plays, obviously scoring a touchdown where they go for the 2-point conversion to take the early lead. He had 2 touchdown passes in the game. He had 300 and something yards passing. Like, everything that I see, like, he could have been, if Oregon wins, you're talking about is Bo Nix the Heisman instead of is Michael Penix the Heisman. So it's honestly just kind of looking at both of the teams as well, and who ended up winning that game, that we're probably saying Michael Penix is the Heisman now instead of Bo Nix possibly being the Heisman. So just one whole game that kind of warps your whole entire mind on the idea.
Yeah, and I mean, that's all it takes. I mean, this isn't something people forget about lightly. Like we talked about before, like, no one's going to remember the reason the U lost in final seconds, like on that Madden bullshit. They're just going to see a loss in the loss column.
Yeah, definitely. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. I don't think Washington will lose a game, but they can. Obviously, we've seen these teams have really bad sleeper weeks where they end up losing. They almost lost to Arizona. We saw a game this week with Louisville losing to Pitt, and losing to Pitt pretty handily, which no one really expected to see except for Ross.
Because they benched our boy Phil Jerkovic.
Yeah. So, just Washington really put themselves in a good spot here. I was saying for a while that I thought they might be the number 1 team in the nation. I started kind of lean back on that. I thought Oregon was going to be better than them. Just for some odd reason, I just felt like Oregon was the better team. All of a sudden,
it's the cool uniforms.
Yeah, that's what it is. And now we're looking at Washington possibly going to be the representative for the Pac-12 in the college football playoff. But we'll see. Pac-12 championship game could go either way yet. We'll see what ends up being there. USC still hasn't lost a game in conference. So,
yeah, and I mean, it absolutely could have been an off day for Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Regardless, it'll hurt his Heisman chances, throwing 3 picks in a game.
Yeah.
But it honestly, ate some bad food before the game, got some bad news before the game. It could be a million different things. We'll see how he bounces back, though. Pat, we see in the comments, what's up? How about them Irish? Pat?
Yeah. Completely different team.
Who the fuck were those guys, Bruno?
They knew how to tackle. They knew how to play defense in general. They were forcing turnovers. They were getting
when that pocket collapsed, they actually got hands on Williams. I mean, it was night and day from last year or 2 of the past 3 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if you would have seen this Notre Dame team making those big tackles late against Ohio State, and obviously if they would have tackled at all against Louisville, we'd be in a completely different zone talking about Notre Dame right now. And in general,
I mean, that was all the talk after losing to Ohio State. Well, season's over. We're not beating USC. We can't tackle in the open field.
Yeah, and they did that. It's like they sat there and didn't take Louisville seriously just so that they were ready for what USC was going to bring. But, yeah, they went out there. They took care of Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams, obviously, worst game he's had in his collegiate career. And I'm glad that it happened against the Irish. It kind of makes us at least feel a little bit better for what the season is. Good possibility they go 10-2. I mean, they do gotta play Pitt in 2 weeks. So
Pitt, and then Clemson.
Yeah,
and then
Pitt,
another
Clemson,
bye week,
Stanford.
I think, right?
Yeah, Pitt, Clemson, Wake Forest, and Stanford is what's left on the schedule for the Irish. So all games that are very winnable for them. That game against Clemson hasn't been determined what time of day or night it's going to be. So obviously, that could end up being a night game at Clemson, and they're going to be jacked up because that's basically going to be their season. They're going to want nothing more than to beat the Irish just because that's what people like to do. They put a big circle around the Notre Dame.
It's everybody else's Super Bowl.
Yeah, so we'll be looking forward to that. But in general, the story is here. USC's defense still not very good. Notre Dame's offense had no problem scoring, creating scores off turnovers. Estime got going, which we haven't seen him do in a couple of weeks. And I mean, the rest was history. There wasn't any point in this game where I was like, oh man, USC is going to come back and win.
Yeah, it's like you always feel like you're playing from behind, even when you have a lead with Notre Dame against these big schools.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't feel that at all this week. And I'm like, they got Caleb Williams on the other side. Like, and no, it just Notre Dame looked like they were prepared in every facet of the game. I know that we saw a thing that the last 10 previous matchups over the last 10 years are skipping out on I don't think we played them in 2020 during the COVID year, but over the course of the last 10 seasons, Notre Dame is 7-3 against USC and now 8-3. And like I told you, I'm like, I didn't think that was the case. It doesn't seem like we go out there and handle USC all the time. And I guess Notre Dame does. So
it's like the fucking, what do you call the Mandela effect?
Yeah.
It's like, no, I could vividly remember Notre Dame losing at least 8 of those games.
Yeah. I mean, I remember there was one a couple of years ago where both teams were pretty bad. And it just like, for Notre Dame, USC, I mean, it was just like, yeah, I hate USC, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Might have even been during like, yeah, I can't remember what year it was, but yeah, I remember Notre Dame being like 8-4 and USC, or 8-3 and USC being 7-5, and it just being like Notre Dame came off one of those losses where you're just like, how the fuck did they lose to that team? And
yeah,
and that's kind of how we felt coming into this one. But I did get pretty amped up for this game, and I can't say anything more than just great job by the Irish overall, being prepared. Hopefully they're prepared for the rest of the season. I know that they have a bye week this week.
Just a very well-earned bye week after 4 ranked matchups.
Yeah, all in prime time. So I'm sure those guys enjoyed the win on Saturday, and they're going to hopefully rest up and get ready for the end of the year stretch.
I imagine a win like that against a team like that going into a bye week is probably something like out of Blue Mountain State or something like.
Yeah,
get a couple days off. Freeman texts everybody, said, "Hey, don't worry about coming in until Tuesday, maybe." But that's how about a Xavier Watts? Probably the best collegiate day, arguably in the history of college football. Did you see his stat lines? It was ridiculous.
I know that his name was being called out a lot, but I did not see the stat lines. If you want to go ahead with them.
I don't have him in front of me, but he had 2 picks, a touchdown, a handful of tackles. a forced fumble and a recovered fumble.
And that was kind of the big take coming into this game too, was just that the Notre Dame secondary just was pretty non-existent for a lot of it. So Xavier Watts, he's a senior. I mean, he needed to have a big show out game. I'm not sure where he ranks in terms of his NFL prowess, but he before this year, I mean, he never even had an interception coming in this year. So obviously,
well, you kind of think like that's not Benjamin Morrison.
Yeah,
just because that's what we're used to.
Yeah, and
but, I found the line. It's 7 tackles, 4 defensive stops, 2 picks, 3 passes defended, 1 forced fumble, 1 recovered fumble, 1 defensive touchdown.
Yeah, that's a pretty good day.
I mean, for a DB who, like you said, is in his 4th year, don't hear his name a lot. He really came out of his shell, and hopefully he finishes strong like that.
Yeah, I could see him getting some defensive player of the week type mention with numbers like that. Especially
it'd be hard not to give something like that to him. I'm not exactly sure who hands those out, but
it's not me.
No, not me either. What's up, Fat Zach? USC's O-line was atrocious. Yeah, they were. ND's front four were phenomenal. Yeah, also true.
Yeah.
I want to keep blaming Caleb Williams, but yeah, the whole team was just they weren't meshing. They came in, they were practicing in the rain with hoses and shit, fake rain, trying to cover every possible mishap getting tossed their way, and
they didn't. They
didn't have it.
Talking about was the weather for that game, and that the weather was not even a factor because it was
like 45, 50 and drizzles on and off, but that was all it was. I mean, definitely nothing that gives one team a leg up on another.
Yeah, no. Only thing might have been is the Notre Dame crowd because they were pretty rambunctious throughout that night. So
yeah, and we've talked about it before. I mean, you get those 3 points at home, especially with a crowd like that. So it was a fun weekend for the Irish fans. I was talking to your buddy Ross a little bit too. He loved being on the show. We were talking about the Irish, and it was a good weekend for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you live in LA.
Yeah, well, it's good to kind of get this weight off the shoulders, and now I think we could enjoy the rest of the college football season a little bit more, having Notre Dame won that game. With us all being Notre Dame fans. But like we said, we'll kind of see where they go going forward. And we could kind of get going now in terms of like watching who's going to be the top teams in the college football playoff and continue to watch the Heisman race as it develops, because this was definitely a big week in terms of that. So I think Michael Penix Jr. jumps Caleb Williams by quite a bit this week. And then another person who I think jumps Caleb Williams after this week, but a big fan of the show, Drake May, in North Carolina.
Oh yeah, big friend of the show. Drake May loves us.
Drake May leading North Carolina to a big victory over Miami. North Carolina pretty much scoring at will. Drake May throwing for 4 touchdown passes. And a lot of that went to a guy that we talked about at the first episode of the season when we were pissed off at the NCAA, and now finally being able to play in a second game of the year after all the stuff of the NCAA not allowing him to play. Tez Walker having a huge game with catching 3 touchdown passes from Drake May. I think it was 6 catches on 132 yards. So
it's like that Randy Moss Thanksgiving stat.
Yeah. So great to see him finally get the opportunity to play for North Carolina. It's definitely helping out Drake May here. It's definitely helping North Carolina continue to stay undefeated. And it keeps things interesting in the ACC between who's it going to be coming out of there, North Carolina, Florida State. And, we could also kind of throw Duke into the mix as well.
I know they've played a couple solid teams, and Florida State's been playing well all year. Obviously, they beat LSU, Clemson. But for some reason in my mind, I'm just really, really hoping for a Riley Leonard and Drake May showdown in the ACC championship.
Yeah, I am not sure still on what the full status of Riley Leonard is, as he did not play this week for Duke.
I thought I
had their
heard he
back-
was only going to miss a couple weeks. I read that somewhere.
Okay.
I could be
I
wrong,
believe,
but
I believe I did too. But they did have Henry Beelan out there as the quarterback for Duke this week and got them to win. So Duke's still undefeated in conference. North Carolina's undefeated in conference. Florida State's undefeated in conference. Louisville, obviously, a big loss this week that would have kept quite a few teams in terms of who's undefeated in the ACC. But you still got those three teams as undefeated teams in the ACC. And I think having North Carolina possibly being top 10, along with.
all right. Not really sure where Bruno went. He left the studio. Talking about the ACC, obviously Florida State and
Computer shut down.
back. North Carolina, all undefeated in conference. Florida State undefeated still in overall, but it's definitely going to be a showdown until the end of the year. And with Duke missing Riley Leonard for hopefully only 2 more weeks, Duke has to stay undefeated with their backup quarterback. Bruno, you miss us?
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. All of a sudden, I disappeared. And getting back onto it, though, next week is the Duke-Florida State matchup. So it's going to be kind of tough for Duke to hang in there without Riley Leonard, I think. Beelan's stats were not very good for Duke. It was just more or less Duke having the coaching staff that they do, able to run the ball this week. They won 24-3 over North Carolina State. But we do kind of get to see that we Duke get that game a lot earlier than I think that they would like. And I'm sure Riley Leonard's going to do everything that he can to try and get back out on the field this week if it's at all possible.
Yeah. So going into next week, we'll obviously cover more on Friday, but is that a night game, Bruno?
I believe so, yes.
It's at Florida State, I believe.
Yes, it's at Florida State.
Okay, yeah, that's I'm trying to find out what's going on with Riley Leonard as we're talking on here.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's definitely going to, I don't think it's going to be so much of an exposed situation, but it's definitely going to hammer in, not definitely, but it's going to hammer in the future of the ACC play or conference game, because obviously one of those two teams are walking out with a loss like one did in the Pac-12 this week.
Yeah, and I mean, what could end up coming from it? I mean, it's more of a negative thing than anything because North Carolina doesn't play Florida State at all this year. So I think North Carolina does get Duke, of course.
North Carolina's not playing State this year?
No. So you would have to have them match up in a possibly undefeated versus undefeated matchup if they get that far in the ACC championship game, which would be awesome to watch. But I'm kind of with you too. I want Duke. I'd like to see Duke go out there and beat Florida State this week, but it's going to be really tough if Leonard doesn't play for them because the way that Beelan looked, he had a couple of touchdown passes, but overall was not exceptional. It's just that Duke's defense came out there and played tough, and I mean they did the same thing against Notre Dame. It cost them late. Obviously, Notre Dame just was a little bit bigger, and you kind of get the same kind of feel from Florida State being a team that's going to be a little bit bigger. They get the better recruits, so it'll be interesting to see what Duke can do to comprehend that. But we'll get more into that, of course, on Friday. But yeah,
Riley Leonard was a possibility for Saturday, so it's not set in stone, but there is a chance he will be playing this upcoming week. So,
well, that's good to hear. Something to look
he's
into.
got 5 days to prepare. So let's hope we see him healthy out there, which is the biggest thing. I don't think you're helping anybody by putting hurt players out there. This isn't the NFL.
Yeah,
So.
no. And I mean, we've seen that a lot in general of college football this year with a lot of players getting opportunities due to injury. So we'll see. North Carolina, pretty much they have it pretty easy going forward. This was their toughest matchup against Miami this week for a couple of weeks. They don't get Duke until November 11th, and then they get Clemson at Clemson the following week. So they'll have a tough end of the road, but the next couple of weeks they got Virginia, Georgia Tech, and I think that's Cambridge. So I don't expect them to lose to Cambridge. But
they're flying all the way to London.
Yeah, it might be Cameron. I don't know.
It's one of those C teams. We'll figure it out next week.
It starts with a K or a C and an A and an M. It's Campbell. Yeah, Campbell. Duh.
All right, Brian Campbell, big Hawks guy.
Yeah, sure, whatever. Another game that really kind of had things that got kind of interesting this week. A lot more interesting again than what you would have expected coming into it. Alabama and Arkansas. I still don't know what to make of the SEC or the Crimson Tide. I don't know who's good and who's bad. Like after them winning against Texas A&M the week prior at Texas A&M, I was thinking, okay, Jalen Milroe's kind of like coming into his own here a little bit. Alabama's once again going to be a team that's going to have a good shot at winning the SEC championship game. They'll get their opportunity against Georgia at the end of the season. But then they play against Arkansas, a team that they seem to be much better than in all up facets, and Arkansas makes it close, 24-21 the final. And Alabama's just not able to score at will and put teams away with Jalen Milroe is pretty much what I keep on seeing. And it's just like the way that Arkansas was in the game, Alabama was up 21-6 going at the half. So, I'm thinking this one's away. It's done. And then the whole entire second half, it's Arkansas. The only time Alabama scored was a field goal in the third quarter. Arkansas had 2 touchdowns in that half, got really close, kept it interesting down to the last possessions of the game. And we were watching. I was watching. I saw Arkansas made a little mistake there at the end in terms of getting a flag that kind of set them up bad offensively, but they were moving the ball downfield at will otherwise with that chance at late in the game. So I got to go cry downstairs.
That's a good boy.
Jalen
Milroe had quite the interesting game. I'm looking at his stat line here. I didn't realize it was so it was bad, but I didn't realize it was so poor in real time. He threw for 238 yards and 2 touchdowns, 10 completions over only 21 attempts, and 11 rushing attempts for negative 19 yards and a touchdown on the ground. I don't really understand this, but he's making it work as best he possibly can. For 10 completions and 238 yards. I mean, you're averaging over 20 yards a pass there.
Yeah.
But
you're below 50% in terms of completion percent.
Yeah, you're rocking 10 for 21. It just doesn't make sense. He went down 5 times. He didn't throw a pick, but I don't know. It was weird. I was looking through it because I kind of remember watching this game and him being like, normal Jalen Milroe, but I don't remember it being this awful in real time.
Yeah, I mean, he's
just regular bad, not this bad.
Yeah, he's literally just mid. He's mid-tier, and you don't know how bad it's going to be each day. Is pretty much how it's like, or how good it's going to be. Because I was sitting there saying, okay, he's coming into his own, and now I don't know what you're doing. I don't know if he's coming into his own. I know that the defenses in the SEC are tough. It's not always the easiest conference to play in, of course. Everybody wants to beat Bama, but you would just expect at this point in the season Bama to handle the lower tier SEC schools with a little more ease and
It's the Nick Saban effect. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how bad they are. They can play down to them, and they're going to beat them by at least one.
Yeah, I think that it's to a point though where they're going to end up regretting one of these games. It very well could be against LSU coming up.
I do not want to see Brian Kelly beat Alabama again, and I also do not want to see Alabama win another game. So I'm a rocking a hard place kind of guy.
Yeah, Alabama's next matchup next week is against Tennessee, so you do got hope there. And then they get LSU 2 weeks after. So
I think Tennessee has Georgia the following week too, don't they?
I am not too sure on that. I kind of just was looking at Bama's schedule going forward.
Tennessee's got a couple tough ones coming up, but yeah. So Alabama's, same old song and dance that we've been listening to for quite a while. They take shit and they make it a little shiny, I guess. Tennessee and A&M, I know you had mentioned them briefly. That was another odd game after seeing, obviously it wasn't in Texas, but after watching what A&M did last week to do what they did Saturday was kind of weird.
Yeah, Tennessee came out, they won 20-13. Coming into this game, I kind of felt like Tennessee is the better team. So it's just that Tennessee had a really down week against Florida for whatever reason, and that's really going to be the staple on their season. But, they took care of South Carolina pretty easily, and South Carolina's not having a great season by any means, but they're still a tough team. They're very competitive. They keep it close with everyone. Texas A&M's kind of been the same way, but this was a big loss for A&M. They fall to 2-2 in conference. That's the end of any hope you have in terms of doing anything inside of the SEC this year. And it's another year where Jimbo Fisher has already lost 3 games after week 7. So
I think Jimbo Fisher's been on the hot seat for quite some time. And to circle back a little bit to what you're saying about South Carolina, what the fuck is up with that program?
They just can't get above it.
I can't stand him, but people like him. I mean, he's an all right ball player. And he seemed to be doing good things over there on his 3rd team now. But they do shit like go out and they lose to Florida with putting up almost 80 put up 80 combined, and then they hold Georgia down to 24-14 or something like that. I just can't wrap my mind around that program. I don't understand.
I think
are they good? Are they bad? Do they play to their opponents' levels?
I think it just goes back to what the SEC is right now. This year, I just don't think there's anybody who's far and above better than anybody else in the conference. So you're going to see a lot of these crazy mixed matchups. You seen it this week with Missouri and Kentucky. You thought Kentucky was a better team than what they ended up being this week, and Missouri took care of them. Of course, I've been high on Missouri, but every single game in the SEC seems to be a toss-up, and you really don't know what team you're going to get at any time this year. I mean, it's honestly just a whacked out conference in terms of the play that we're seeing. I really don't know what to make sense of it. I've tried to make sense of it betting wise. I've tried to make sense of it just in general. And this is just how these teams are playing each other. I mean, we even watched Vanderbilt sit there and be competitive with Georgia this week for a while. I mean, it's Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is literally the stepping stone of the SEC. You just beat down on them. Everybody does. And that's not happening anymore. It's just, I don't know if there's just not enough recruits to go around and everybody's getting a little bit of each piece of the pie. And it's really affecting just how good each team is overall in the conference. But that's just kind of where it is right now. You really don't know from a week-to-week basis what you're going to see from any of these teams.
Yeah. And the SEC, similar to what we're going to talk about next, the Pac-12 kind of not knowing what the hell anything is. USC is in this weird little fucking mix in the middle now. Obviously, Washington and Oregon up top. But what the hell happened in Arizona, Washington State? I know we've been kind of high on them, talking about, are they good? Are their opponents playing them down? Cam Ward played, I don't know what he did on the ground, but he did not have a good game in the air. But I don't think it would have made much of a difference. That offense was explosive.
Yeah. Arizona, they kept it close with Washington. They took USC to 2 or 3 overtimes. They were a team that was really ranked low. Like they were in the 100s of the 122 teams in the FBS.
Sitting next to UMass and UNLV.
Yeah, like they literally, no one expected Arizona to win any game except for maybe when they play one of those Division I opponents. Like, they're just, nothing that was expected from this team is happening. And then Washington State ranked, obviously, coming into the last week. They've had a good start to the year. They had a big upset against who was it? It wasn't Kansas State. It was Oregon State a couple of weeks ago. And you thought, okay, well, this is the time where the Cougars are kind of busting through, being a really good team. And then
kind of put
got destroyed. I mean, 44-6, that's not a showing. That's a dismantling. So
in Washington State too.
Yeah, I honestly don't know if it's one of those scenarios of, oh, well, it's just Arizona, we're playing down to our opponents. Like, that's what I kind of thought maybe everybody was doing in this conference. And now it's just like, okay, Arizona knows how to play football pretty damn good, don't they? So it's just like,
I want to see a Pac-12 consolation. Let me see Arizona face Stanford. No, I mean, Cam Ward, though, like, we've praised his legs so many times.
Yeah.
8 attempts for 4 yards, long was 7, averaging a half a yard. I mean, if his long was 7 for 4 yards, how many did he go backwards on?
Yeah. It had to be numerous.
3 turnovers. He threw a pick, 2 fumbles lost, only 192 yards, and he actually completed 22 for 30.
Yeah, that's pretty good numbers. It's just, I mean, I didn't have a chance to watch this game much. I just thought that I saw the final score and I saw that Arizona was up big and was kind of just like, whoa, what the hell happened here? Yeah, it honestly is just another one of those things where it's like, you could see upsets happening. I understand upsets happen, but you just don't see them to this extreme. I feel like when it's a ranked opponent at home, maybe a 44-20 game, but they couldn't even get into double digits.
Yeah, I mean, their running game, Arizona, they had 5 touchdowns on the ground over 3 different backs. Coleman put up 3 himself. They all split carries pretty well, 10, 11, and 12. 2 of them put up 70, 1 only 37. But, I mean, they're running a 3 running back system pretty well if they're staying that consistent, and obviously running it right down Washington State's throats. Nothing in the air, though, which is that kind of Pac-12 thing we've been talking about in that lack of defense. So, yeah, it's a little weird to see, but
you can't even fault that because the quarterback for Arizona still was 34 of 43 with 342 yards passing.
No, and I'm not saying that. Obviously they won the red zone battle because he did his fair share. It's just 44 and no touchdowns in the air just isn't something we see often.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I mean, what can you say at this point is a lot of these schools that are top ranked schools this year, they just aren't who we thought they were. I do sometimes think a lot in college football, it does come to the what have you done for me lately kind of mentality. And it is, teams get better as the year goes on. That's what I think you could see is happening with Arizona. I don't know if Washington State's just getting worse as the season goes on.
Well, it's a fine line because, you get tired, you get hurt, but you also get looser and that experience. And it's a very fine line to walk. So we're seeing 2 teams walking that line right now, one for the better and one for the worse. But Yeah, I know everybody we've been pretty high up on this year, long shot wise, has kind of let us down. Syracuse, Cam Ward, Mizzou. But I guess that about wraps it for those bigger games we really wanted to highlight. So I know we kind of touched on it earlier. I didn't look at any numbers on DraftKings or anything. I've lost so much money. I'm just not even going to open the app for a while. I don't know what the numbers drop to. I assume Penix has to be number one. Is that the same case for you? If you're on the committee, does he have your Heisman vote if we had a vote tonight?
Oh yeah, it's pretty far and above because once again it goes into that "what have you done for me lately" kind of idea, and what I see in terms of what Michael Penix Jr. has done for me lately is a lot more than what Caleb Williams has done. I mean, in a lot of ways, Caleb Williams is trying to will this team to victory every single week because the defense is so bad. And you got to sit there and perform at every cost. Like, yeah, Notre Dame's not the easiest place to come into and play, not the easiest school to play, but that defense hasn't been anything special. And you would think that even though, yeah, you might not all be on him, that he comes through and kind of does a little bit more to keep his team in the game. You don't expect a Heisman winner to go out there and get blown out by 28 points, especially when they're ranked higher coming into the game. And I can tell you right now, Caleb Williams is not even considered a top 5 finalist after this week for the Heisman race. His odds on DraftKings, I'm seeing he is 20-1 now. Ranked ahead of him is Drake May at 18-1. Jaden Daniels from LSU at 14-1. Jordan Travis 12-1 from Florida State. JJ McCarthy 10-1 from Michigan. Dylan Gabriel 10-1 from Oklahoma. And minus 130 Michael Penix Jr.
Ooh.
So a huge.
Now we're getting into the heavy favorites now.
Yeah. So that's literally. What else can you say at this point besides it's until Washington loses a game and Michael Penix has a bad game in that game.
I need to see multiple picks.
Yeah,
no touchdowns in the air for my tune to really change.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be him. It's going to be him by a lot for a while. I can see a guy like Dylan Gabriel getting up there. You can't see these undefeated quarterbacks out there still. Gabriel, Travis, Drake May. There's quite a few schools that have yet to lose a football game yet. And until those schools lose a football game, I'm not going to take anyone out of the race because that tends to be what they'll kind of look at. But even if he does, Johnny Manziel was still a finalist when Texas A&M was like 8-4 or 9-3. I know that was a big deal for him and whatnot, but the idea that Caleb Williams had his worst collegiate game ever and he's not even considered a top 5 favorite in terms of betting odds.
Only a month after his dad said we'll play another year of college ball if we don't like the pro team.
Yeah, so
hey, you said it best, man. He looked like a bear out there.
Yeah, he looked like a Bears quarterback, and God knows
when you were touching on those undefeated probables, you forgot to mention our boy Kyle McCord.
Oh yeah, he's
JJ McCarthy too. I have a fun stat a buddy of mine sent me. We'll talk about that on Friday when we kind of preview the schedules. But they haven't played anybody. Rutgers is ranked 50-something, and that was their best opponent so far. They end the year Penn State, Maryland, at Penn State. I'm not sure where Maryland's at, and then at Ohio State. Or no, at Michigan for Ohio State, I believe. So that is really going to be the tell-all for if JJ can really hang with the big dogs.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he's, personally at least, in the same conversation as Penix or even Dylan Gabriel or Drake May.
Yeah. They'll honestly be the show. I mean, I have to kind of give it up to Michigan. They've just been better and better as the weeks have gone on. it's going to be an interesting matchup too this week with Penn State and Ohio State coming up. It's going to kind of see who's going to really be the main competition for Michigan to.
That's an 11 o'clock game, right?
Yeah,
that's going to be on Big Noon.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to watch that game. We'll see. I was hoping there'd be more in the late slate, more possibility of me being able to watch it this coming Saturday. It might be that Saturday where I kind of go and do other things to make the fiance happy instead of watching football all day. So, but yeah, I'm never really impressed by JJ McCarthy. So I'm
not saying he's not good. I just haven't seen anything spectacular out of him.
Yeah. And I mean, it could be a lot of it too. Just Michigan hasn't played anybody. And when you don't play people don't pay attention to you. And that's pretty much what I've seen with Michigan this year. It's like, I mean, when they played those 3 games without Harbaugh, it was boo-foo state every single week. Like, it didn't matter who they played. That's an interesting comment.
In the effect to not offend anybody, I'm not even going to read that because I can't. JJ McCarthy really, I don't think he's bad. Like I said, I just haven't seen him really do anything to shock me. And we'll watch in the final 3 games of Michigan season where they really are. So
I apologize. I got a little distracted here because I had a little soccer parlay going, and there's 1 game left on the parlay, and it's saying that the game was abandoned for unknown reasons. And I'm like, so does this mean
is that a push?
I'm like, what happens now? And I also kind of want to know, how does a game just get abandoned? Like, why is that?
Is that like Snapchat when you delete a picture and it's like, are you sure you want to abandon your masterpiece?
Hey, Nick, see you in the chat there. Air Force sneaking into a New Year's Six Bowl over Notre Dame. For Air Force to get in, they have to go undefeated the rest of the year, and they're not going to sit there and put them above if there's any other top conference school out there right now that is non-Power 5 conference, I should say, that's ahead of them. Let's see. I know Air Force did jump into the top 25 this week. We're going to kind of
they're 6-0 at 22.
6-0, and every other team ahead of them right now is a Power 5 team. So if Air Force is undefeated the rest of the year, Nick, there's a very good shot that they are going to get a New Year's Six Bowl, because that is part of the rules now, that a team that is a non-Power 5 conference school, one of them has to play in a New Year's Six game. So if Air Force stays undefeated throughout the rest of the year, they don't rank Tulane ahead of them, because I know they were really good last year. They made it to a New Year's Six Bowl. They've been pretty good this year. Their main loss is the Ole Miss, so you're not going to fault them for that.
That goddamn heartbreaker.
Yeah, so I think
they played 3 quarters and just stopped.
Yeah. I know the Mountain West is tough. There's been some good schools. I mean, I know Chris White over here was talking about Colorado State game earlier today with Boise State and how crazy that one got, where Colorado State ended up pulling it out late 31-30. So tough conference there. I would love to see the Air Force in. I have family that has been in the Air Force. I've kind of always rooted for Air Force more than Army and Navy when it comes to the naval, when it comes to the military schools. So I'd love to see it.
Yeah. I don't like Navy for, obvious reasons. There's a long historic rivalry there with Notre Dame. To be entirely honest, I have not watched very many Air Force, Army, or Navy, excluding Notre Dame games in my life. So, like Bruno had mentioned, though, Mountain West is heating up, so it'll definitely be on the docket. I got my plethora of TVs, so.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to watch Air Force quite a little bit throughout the year. Just whenever they're on CBS Sports and that, they get the small TV out of the 3 that I have going most Saturdays and Sundays. So, Yeah, it'll be something that I definitely look and pay attention to. And kind of thanks for kicking us off in terms of our top 25 talk here, Nick. We're just getting into it now. First team up, and we do have some news to talk about. Georgia still ranked number 1. How long does that last without Brock Bowers?
Not long. I don't know. I feel like I say this a lot, where I just come out and say nope or not going to happen, but they obviously struggle. We saw what happened against Auburn until Bowers really started picking it up late in the second half. Each and every week, go through AP, and less people vote for Georgia's first place spot. It keeps going to Michigan is up to 16. Washington has 2. Texas had 1 or 2 before they lost to Oklahoma. But they're down to 43, which down to is kind of a funny way to put it. But I think we talked earlier in the year about their strength of schedule. I don't think it's the hardest, but they will have to come and play that SEC conference championship game. And that's where I think if you have no Brock Bowers, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
So when I look at it, this next week they are off. But after that, they go play Florida, which, they're back and forth. But then they play back-to-back ranked teams now. Missouri's ranked. They got to play Missouri. Ole Miss is ranked. They got to play Ole Miss. Tennessee's ranked. They got to play Tennessee. All these games likely without Brock Bowers. For those of you who haven't seen or heard, the star player for Georgia had a high ankle sprain, and he had surgery today to try and make the high ankle sprain be recover faster. But after this type of surgery, it's still a 4 to 6 week injury, depending. I mean, we could see. I mean, we've seen freak recoveries. We've seen people take longer to recover. I mean, we're looking at that with Cam Rising at Utah. It's going to be very tough for Georgia to do it without that player who seems to be able to run over other schools' players and take over games for them when they're struggling to find it anywhere else offensively on the field.
Yeah. Obviously 4 to 6 weeks. We see guys like Mahomes last year playing through a high ankle sprain. Obviously, that was the playoffs. He's a professional athlete. There's a little bit of a difference there, but it can be done. He is a scrambler, but he's a true pocket passer at heart, I think. So when you have a guy who's out here actively running routes, you cannot do that on a high ankle sprain.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be helping anybody. It would be extremely painful if you try to tough through it. Their main objective right now is to keep that unstoppable defense right where they're at. I think they have a top 3 defense, maybe only Penn State better. But that's really what you're going to rely on the next 3-4 weeks. I thought when we had discussed earlier in the year, it must be a different team schedule we looked at where they kind of had an easy boat the rest of the way on.
It was Georgia, but as the season has gotten continue
teams move up and down.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, we looked at Tennessee and kind of like just wrote them off after they lost to Florida. And then when Florida got blown out by Kentucky, we kind of wrote them off. And then
Kentucky got blown out by Alabama. It's a vicious cycle.
I mean, like I said, the SEC doesn't make any sense. Missouri took care of Kentucky last week. I mean, nothing makes sense about the SEC. So I'm going to go with these are tough teams for them to beat because they're struggling against teams like Vanderbilt. Not having this player there is really going to make it tough for them to stay number 1 and stay undefeated. I mean, granted, Georgia hasn't lost in almost 3 seasons now, but it is a very possible thing to happen if they don't have that 1-star player, honestly, who tends to take over football games for them. I mean, if he didn't take over that game against South Carolina a couple of weeks ago, we would have been talking about South Carolina in a different light after that week. So it's going to be very interesting moving forward to watch this Georgia team. I think the one saving grace for them right now is they don't got to worry about playing for another 12 days. So kind of go with that. Also going into it, Michigan ranked number 2, we mentioned, had a pretty easy game this week. Ohio State had a pretty easy game this week. Florida State manhandled Syracuse. With these teams, it's going to get tough right now. We're going to see if they can remain undefeated. Ohio State has Penn State this week, so don't be surprised if Penn State's in the top 4 with a win over Ohio State. I don't know if they'll jump Oklahoma, Washington, and Florida State, but we'll see what kind of game it is. If Penn State dominates them, like I think they have the chance to.
They put up another 62-0 performance.
Yeah, but Ohio State's been playing better week after week, especially after that Notre Dame game. They look like a different team. McCord looks like a better quarterback.
Yeah, unfortunately, McCord is definitely progressing. He is looking better. That team, I mean, they have 2 top 5 receivers in the entire NCAA.
Yeah, Marvin Harrison was disgusting against Purdue on Saturday. I bet on that game, and it was a pretty easy cover just because Marvin Harrison can't be guarded. Yeah. Then, of course, what's kind of interesting here, coming off of the big win against Oregon, still not in the top 4, but they are in the top 5. We got Washington. They did get 2 first-place votes, which is more than Ohio State or Florida State received. So interesting there. A lot of the powers that be in terms of this. Obviously not comfortable putting Washington ahead of them yet. I think a lot of that does come down to just the bias of these other conferences and that whole West Coast thing. Those West Coast teams do tend to get the shaft end of the stick a lot of time, it seems.
Yeah, they certainly do. 6 and 7 are Oklahoma and Penn State, both dropping a spot. Oklahoma was on a bye, right?
Yeah.
And then Penn State beat the absolute piss out of Moraine Valley Community College 62-0.
Yeah, poor Moraine Valley.
I don't understand dropping a spot. I understand they played nobody, especially a Big Ten team too. Like that doesn't make sense to me. But I guess they all have their reasons.
And they didn't want to leave Washington down there after the big win. Something similar might happen with a big win from Penn State this week against Ohio State.
Well, I think that's what they were doing. They were looking into the future, saying, well, they're going to get their big jump next week if and when they can beat Ohio State.
Yeah, absolutely. Then got Texas, number 8, moving up a spot. They're coming off the loss to Oklahoma. They had a bye week this week. Oregon only moving down 1 spot after the loss to Washington. The game was that close. I
think 1 spot is absolutely fair.
Yeah, I mean,
that game could have went any different direction.
Yeah, we'll see how it works out the rest of the year for them. But I mean, it's 1 or 2 plays going the opposite direction of a different outcome. A lot different talk this week, so no problem there. Something I do like seeing though, North Carolina now is in the top 10. So
jumping up 2 spots after what you had mentioned, beating Miami pretty easily. Drake May looking on another level. Tez Walker coming out and showing what he can do. Unfortunately, a little later in the season than we'd like him to, but at least he got out there.
Yeah, and they jumped Alabama. Alabama came off of a win against Arkansas, a close win that we highlighted earlier, but nonetheless, it was a game that wasn't impressive for Bama when you thought they would take care of it. So Bama gets jumped by North Carolina. Oregon State. One other thing I kind of sat there and think about, you're going to chalk it up because we're going to start seeing more 1-loss teams start to sneak into the top 10. I mean, heck, Notre Dame's on the top 15 and they got 2 losses, but schedule they've had, it's tougher than anyone else in the nation. As per usual, doubters.
Notre Dame doesn't play anybody.
Yeah. You're going to see a lot of these number 1 teams, but they're going to get jumped. They deservedly deserve to be jumped by a team like North Carolina right now. So, Oregon State moving up 3 spots this week. They're a really good school. They got upset by Washington State. Could be an interesting team to look out for in terms of trying to upset these other Pac-12 teams that are so good. But I just don't know what to make of it for sure.
Yeah. Ole Miss staying put at 13. 14, we have Utah kind of clawing their way back. They jumped up 2 spots from 16. And go ahead, buddy.
He'll kind of come back to, next week they play USC. Does Cam Rising play? If Cam Rising's finally back.
fucking Pat McAfee like 3 weeks ago on College Game Day was like, Willie, won't he? Like, you goddamn bastard. Getting our hopes up. And we're just sitting here like, it's been 3 weeks. It's like Derrick Rose all over again in 2014 or 15. Like, come on. Are you coming back or not? There's 7 different return games.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll kind of just push that aside again until we know. Notre Dame, as we mentioned, moving back in the top 15. Roller coaster of 4 weeks for the Irish. And that's why they kind of are there, is they've, like we just said, toughest schedule in the nation. Team that they beat during that stretch right below them in Duke. Duke, obviously, hoping to get Riley Leonard back this week before they face off with Florida State. That could be a very fun matchup to watch on Saturday night this week. We'll talk more about that one, obviously, come this Friday. Tennessee, we've talked a bit about them today, moving up to number 17. Don't know what to make of them, but we did see that they have a game against Georgia coming up. It's just
that 12-17 vortex.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with them. Don't really know what to make of the team in general. Team with the biggest drop-off of the week, and well-deserved after the way Notre Dame took care of them.
Southern Cal, baby.
USC dropping 8 spots to number 18. Pretty much
down 8.
They might even be like out of the college football playoff conversation after this. I mean, I know
we've talked about it before. Like, this is obviously sports, but it's also reality TV, and people want to watch good TV. Nobody's going to have fun watching, Michigan or Penn State or Georgia putting up fucking 70 on USC.
Yeah. And
so Heisman talks, college football playoff talks. It's got to be pretty stressful down in Southern Cal this whole week, and they've got some work to do in the upcoming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our fucking Brian Kelly haunting again, back up 3 spots to 19. Made me look like a damn idiot.
They're gonna push LSU up there, and they want to make sure that LSU Alabama game gets all the eyes and ears that they can on it in a couple.
Yeah, you have to keep them ranked simply for that.
Yeah,
there's too much money to be made in the SEC to take them out of the top 25, especially if you're going to have a well-deserved but non-conference 2-loss team in the top 25.
Absolutely agreed. Jumping back into the top 20, my favorite team that's not my favorite team, the Missouri Tigers. Another SEC school that I thought coming in this year could have a good season. And they have so far. 6-1 for Missouri is really good. I hope it continues, and down deep, I want them to be the team that beats Georgia. So I
wouldn't hate seeing it.
Number 21, dropping 7 spots. The team that beat Notre Dame the week prior, Louisville. They got by Pitt.
Gets their fucking shit smacked by a terrible Pitt team. Only dropped 7. They'd probably be ranked 50 something if they didn't beat Notre Dame just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Good for Pitt for the upset. Good job, Ross.
Hey, they won their Super Bowl, and shout out Ross, way to call that one.
Well, Pitt does get to play Notre Dame again, so I'm
gonna be sitting over here with my fucking foot in my mouth in 2 weeks.
So, team that buddy Nick brought up, I could see Ross is bringing in some of the old frat boys from NIU, so good to see that. Air Force ranked number 22 this week, undefeated. We just talked about them a little bit. Going to be fun to see how much they ride out. Tulane also now ranked in the top 25 again. They were great last year. Their only loss this year is Ole Miss. They're definitely a team to watch for. I hope Air Force stays above them, because I would like to see Air Force in a New Year's 6 game, but that's up to them staying undefeated. They're only halfway through the season. They got another 6 games to play. And I think
as of right now, they're bowl eligible. They have their 6.
Yeah. And the Mountain West does have a championship game too, I believe. So, that means 7 more games for Air Force in order to get into the college football New Year's 6.
Number 24.
Iowa. No.
Fucking Kirk Ferenz. He's a good friend of the show. He chimes in sometimes. He won't come on, but he'll text me and Bruno here and there.
Yeah.
Fucking Iowa, man. I fucking hate Iowa. I had no issue until that goddamn crawl out of his ass comment.
Yeah.
You can't put up 41, gloat about it, call out every beat writer who's ever said a bad thing about you, and then put up a goose egg the next week. That man deserves everything he gets. I
am kind of just in disbelief that they went out there and handled Wisconsin the way that they did. The defense is just that damn good, though. I got to give Iowa credit. They're winning games because their defense does make sure that they win games. Because if Iowa wasn't so tough defensively, I mean, they're a team that you could probably easily say is top 10 in the country defense-wise. They wouldn't be where they are because they can't score. They don't score. It's not their style of play. And good for them getting back in the top 25. It's just, when they have to go play these real opponents like Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State, eventually the defense isn't going to be enough because the field position battles is going to be beat. You're going to get beat by it because they will move the ball a little bit on you no matter what. So it's just like Iowa's a team that's there. If they had any sort of offense, they could be really damn good.
Is Cade McNamara out for the year?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, so they're really goddamn Kirk Ferenz is going to have an excuse now. And then to wrap up the top 25 is UCLA at 4-2, dropping 7 spots, but barely hanging on.
So they lost to Oregon State, so they're being punished but not being punished. Just another one of those Pac-12 scenarios where I don't know who the hell's good and who's bad necessarily besides Washington and Oregon. Is what it is in terms of this. I'd like to start seeing a lot more of these non-Power 5 schools that are undefeated and 5-1 getting up there instead of teams like UCLA. But I digress.
Bless you. There are a lot of big jumps vote-wise in this top 25. Like just starting at 21 to 22 is 309 to 245 votes. Then 22 to 3 is 245 to 137, and then it stays close, 137, 125, 122. So it was seeming pretty decisive for this week's top 25. James Madison was next. They're 26, only receiving 70 votes, and Clemson's after them only receiving 35.
James Madison's a team that I saw this week, and I turned on the TV, and they were dominating a very good Georgia State team. And I was like, oh, they'll be ranked this week. And no, they're still just keeping them out. So
sure as shit.
That's going to be another team when it comes to Air Force. Like, that's going to be a tough team to stay above. I don't know if James Madison's going to lose because they roll everybody. It's going to be very interesting to see who these teams are in a couple of weeks as these Power 5 conference schools continue to beat up on each other in terms of the ones that are ranked. Because I didn't look. I know there's quite a few, but I think there's got to be 3 or 4 again next week where it's ranked versus ranked opponents. I mean, obviously, Ohio State and Penn State, neither of those teams are going to fall out of the top 25 after a loss. But
right. Georgia, I think you had mentioned. Or no, they're going on a bye. That'll be next week.
Yeah, you could definitely see it with USC if they lose to Utah. I don't know if it'll be the same way reverse, but it could.
Come on, Cam Rising, we need you more than ever.
Yeah, there is just all those matchups, and then the SEC is just piled full of teams that are always in the 25 to 20 range every single couple of weeks, and one a loss, and they're out of the top 25 again. It's crazy. And I have to think we're maybe 2 weeks away from the first college football playoff. I know they like to announce it during right when the college basketball season starts with that big Tuesday night thing that they do.
Yeah, it shouldn't be too far out. I was going to say they usually do it in the middle of the week, I think, right?
Yeah,
it's always on Tuesday. Like a Sunday AP drop. It's usually Monday night or Tuesday.
Yeah, they always do it at Tuesday during whatever. It'll either be during a MACtion game like NIU playing a Western Michigan, or they'll do it during the college basketball games because they always have like early November. It'll be like Duke versus
Just
Kentucky.
try and draw in some viewers.
Well, everyone's gonna watch Duke versus Kentucky anyway, so they know they got
Yeah, it's first game of the year. Everybody's turning on the blue.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll obviously cover more of that on Friday. Before we wrap it up, how'd you do this week on betting wise?
Early games, I was 2-0. I was like, this is great. Afternoon games, I was 0-4. I'm like, what the fuck? Late games, I'm 2-0, and then I put in a late parlay with another 2 games that I kind of liked, and I hit that. And I was 4-4 in what I put out there this week, and had a nice like $300 parlay hit. So overall, it's a lot better than it's been. Still staying 3 games below 500. Duke and North Carolina took care of business for me. Ohio State took care of business for me. Eastern Michigan, the Maction game took care of business for me. I might be featuring a Maction game every week going forward. Might have to do it. Might have to sit there and put in a bet on our Monday show in the coming weeks, because Maction does start to go to Tuesday and Wednesday nights in the coming weeks here.
Yeah, we have football for like the next, what is it?
Oh yeah, there's like
straight days.
Yeah, we ain't getting a day without any football until the college football season ends, and they go into their bowl season play. So not until December is there a day without football on some form of television for you.
Beautiful.
So get involved in the Maction, because it's great. But the afternoon slate, I honestly just got to the point where I was so irritated, and just BYU played like crap out of nowhere. I'm like, at least make it competitive. They didn't even know. Wisconsin and Iowa. Wisconsin losing straight up to Iowa wasn't expected, but Wisconsin couldn't score a touchdown either. It just was one of those weeks where it felt good, it felt bad, and then it felt really good again. So I'll take the 4-4. I know that you had your pick out there. And I
finally have an L. It took this many weeks, but it's finally there.
I'll be honest with you, pal. This is the first week where I didn't throw money on it, because I was like, this just isn't a good pick.
I was at work. I was rifling through. I usually do it on Friday night, but with you going Saturday and me unsure if I was going to be on with you or not, I didn't even think about it. And then I was rifling through Bleacher Report. I was looking at spreads, and I was like, you know what? I got shit to do. Peyton Thorne impressed the shit out of me against Georgia. I hate Brian Kelly. This makes sense for me.
Yeah, I got you. Unfortunately, Brian Kelly just was not going to let you have this one. I think he's given you a couple this year already where we've all felt like, yeah.
Good. Yeah. I know our buddy Fat Zach, he had mentioned the Arkansas-Bama game. Probably should have just stole that from him. I was thinking about the Arizona-Washington State game. Probably should have went that way. And my other idea was Syracuse at Florida State. That one felt unsafe, so I kind of tossed it out the window before the other 3, which was a good call on my part. But so I have a loss now. I'm not happy about it. I'm just going to quit the whole fucking show. I have nothing to live for. But
that's a little extreme.
Yeah, well, it's bad, man. I lost so much money the past like 2 weeks.
I'm still sitting here wondering what this abandoned game does to me.
Yeah, that's got me beat. Is it like instead of getting relegated, it's like they just leave the players in a stadium?
It's literally
throw some chains on the gates.
It's literally like they just said, "Screw you guys, I'm going home."
Fuck. But yeah. So we'll be back Friday. I'll have another bet for you. Try and go to what am I? 5-1, 6-1.
5-1.
Try and get to that 6-win mark. And Bruno, try and get above 500. We'll have some previews to talk about. I think Bruno mentioned 4 first ranked, maybe. So we'll have some stuff to talk about Friday. Bruno, you got anything else?
No. Enjoy the week. This is the part of the week where I just pretty much work and don't do anything else. So until Friday, no drinking, no nothing. This is kind of a sad moment for me. So, everyone,
we're not low energy on Mondays because Notre Dame's bad at football. We're low energy on Mondays because we have to go back to work.
yeah, I mean, I start at 7:30 at night, and the Gerbs goes back on Tuesday at 4 a.m. So this is kind of like our last little bit of off time. I know the Gerbs go to bed pretty early on Mondays, so
I go to bed when he's starting work, and he's halfway through his day when I'm texting him on my way to work.
Yeah, so
it's
we'll get to Friday again. I know that it'll come, and we'll be happy again on Friday because then we don't gotta think about work. Well, you still do, but not as much.
Saturdays are usually my pretty nice days. No bosses are there. I get to kind of just do what I want as long as I get my shit done. This one was an exception. I was fairly busy, it actually kind of worked out because Hulu bugged out, and I couldn't even watch the 11 o'clock games till I got home at 12:15. So
that's good.
So everything happens for a reason. But
you have a good week, Chris. We'll be talking. Everybody else, thanks for getting involved in the chat. Zach, Pat, Nick. Not going to mention the other one, but yeah, thanks for getting involved, everybody. We appreciate it. So keep telling your friends, keep getting in the comments, and we'll be back on Friday again with a new show.
All right, this has been College Football on Tap, brought to you by the On Tap Sports Knot. Have a good day. Bruno, you want to take us out?
Bye.